Hello class, I wanted to make this quick video to help you understand how you should be reading a mathematics textbook, but specifically tips for reading the textbook for this class. So, the first thing you should do, even before you begin reading through the book, is that you should be taking notes while you are reading. Now, your notes could be on the book itself, or if you have a digital copy and you have a way of kind of writing on your digital copy, that's fine. Or you could write your notes separately. You may find if you are writing on the book that you run out of room, you could use whatever method you would like. However, you should be taking notes as you are reading. And the first thing you should be taking notes on, what are the relevant learning objectives from this course that we will be talking about? Now, with each prep work assignment, I list the relevant learning objectives for that reading. So for this first reading, we have the learning objective of defining probability in a new context. And that's the first thing that should go into your notes, is that is the learning objective, the main purpose for this section, and what you will be assessed on down the road. So that should be at the beginning of your notes, is that learning objective. Now, as you are going into your reading, you should be focusing on a few different aspects of the reading. Reading mathematics is different than reading in other disciplines. For example, in a humanities discipline, there is a lot more reading to be done, but you're reading kind of at a lighter level. In mathematics, there's not as much reading to be done. For example, this first reading assignment is not even 3 pages long. However, mathematics text and reading is a lot more dense, and you have to read a lot more deeply than you would in different disciplines. There are special things you should be looking for as you are reading. One of these things are definitions. Now, the textbook tends to bold new important terminology. So we see here random process, outcome, probability are things that are in bold. And these are definitions of really important terms. Mathematics uses definitions in a very fundamental and foundational way, and you should be very aware of these. These are things that you should be copying down into your notes in kind of an exact way. Mathematicians use language very precisely, and each word choice is done very purposefully. So you should be very conscious of that and very aware of that as you are reading and writing down definitions. When you come across definitions, you should try and come up with your own examples and put these in your notes as well, involving that definition. Uh, Other things to keep in mind when you're looking at definitions is that sometimes the book will present a definition as a formal abstract definition. And this is good. This is kind of the mathematician side of things and how we want to formally be thinking about these terms. But sometimes the book will also present a definition from a more intuitive point of view. This is also very useful because it can help us understand what the definition is actually saying. So we should be conscious of both styles of definition, both the abstract and the formal, which is very important from a mathematician's point of view, but then the intuitive side to help us understand conceptually what is happening. Something else we should be looking for as we do our reading are examples. When you read an example, you should copy and recreate that example in your own notes and make sure that you understand what is happening in that example. If you can, create another example that is similar to the one being presented and try to answer that as well. This will really help test whether or not you're understanding what they are trying to present with the example given. If you're capable of creating a separate example and doing that example on your own, you have a good understanding of what this example is presenting to you. Mathematics is full of rich theorems and lemmas and rules and laws and all of these kinds of things. Each of these should be copied into your notes and made special note, especially of the hypotheses being made in whatever the rule or law or theorem being presented is. An example of this is the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean theorem states that if you have a right triangle, and that is your hypothesis, then you get the result that we're all familiar with, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. An important note is that hypothesis, though. The Pythagorean theorem only works on a right triangle, and so that is a very important note to make. It is a common mistake to come across theorems, gloss over the hypotheses, and just look at the conclusion or the result and ignore the hypothesis. However, that may not always be true. For example, with the Pythagorean theorem, that does not apply to triangles that are not right triangles. So it's important to take note of the hypotheses. This book uses a thing called guided practices. Think of these as an exercise for you to test your understanding. A solution to guided practices are presented in the footnotes at the bottom of the page where that guided practice is given. You should not read the guided practice and then read the solution. What you should do is read the guided practice, stop, and try and solve that guided practice on your own. If you are having trouble solving it, don't yet look at the solution. Go back into the previous material and try to resolve your problem on your own. Once you have a solution, that is the time to look at the footnote and compare to what the authors are presenting as their solution. Sometimes you will have the same solution, sometimes you'll have different solutions. When you have something different, you should explore why you've come up with its different answers. Is it okay that you have different answers and it's just different ways of looking at things? Or is it possible that you or the author have done something incorrectly and try and identify where that may have happened? The last thing that you should do as you're reading is actively challenging yourself and testing your understanding of what you are reading. So for example, if I am reading in the middle of the page here, probability is defined as a proportion, and it always takes values between 0 and 1 inclusively. Okay, well, what does that mean? Can I have a probability of negative? No, that wouldn't really make sense. Can I have a probability of above 100%? No, that doesn't make sense either, right? And so you should be kind of creating these questions as you read to make sure you're understanding the underlying concepts. These questions should be written down in your notes as well as what answers you come up with for them. That way, as you are reviewing your notes, you can understand these small little questions that you've come up with to help you understand the material. Now, when you have finished reading, i.e., you have gotten through all that you need to read for that assignment, you are not yet done with your reading. There are more notes that you should be doing. So the first thing you should do then at the end is ask yourself, what was the main point of this reading? What was the main idea or main ideas of this reading? And write those down. You should have one sentence per main idea or ideas, and you should have at least one main idea written, but no more than three. If you're getting more than three, then it's too big, and you should try and consolidate things where you can. But try and get a big picture sense of what this reading is about. Now, look back to the relevant learning objectives for that reading and ask yourself, am I capable of doing this now? So for this first reading, defining probability in a new context, can I do that? Along those lines, try to create a question or a prompt that could assess that objective. So if you were going to write a quiz that assessed this objective, what would be a question that you could ask? Write that into your notes and then try and answer that on your own without referring to the textbook. If you can do that, you're in really good shape. Keep in mind that we will be discussing these things in class, exploring in further depth our learning objectives, and getting a better understanding of things. So you may not be fully capable of doing the learning objective, but you should have a baseline understanding. Lastly, what additional questions do you have from the reading? Was there something that you weren't sure of that you read and you're like, I still don't really understand this, even after completing the reading? All of those questions should be written down into your notes as well. We will have an opportunity to talk about those during class time. So this is a brief overview of what you should be doing in each of your readings. Part of your assessment for this course is coming to class prepared, and my way of assessing you on that is I'm going to be reviewing your notes and having a quick conversation with you about the reading. So be sure you are coming prepared to class with that information.